In this training, we're looking at using the DfE Assessment Guidance that was developed by Dingley's Promise, using it towards creating SMART goals for children with additional needs, SAPPs, and then using them for SEN inclusion funding requests, potentially early years SEN funding requests and EHC requests as appropriate. If you search for DfE Assessment Guidance, you'll find the assessment tools and the assessment guidance on the DfE website. And the 4 broad areas of need that have been identified are communication and interaction, cognition and learning, social and emotional, and sensory or physical needs. And there is an assessment tool for each one of these. The DfE assessment tools are usually black and white, and they're saved on the DfE website as PDFs, but we have some Word versions available, and I've just shaded this one into different shades of green to demonstrate that the I can statements, as they're called, move from bottom to top. So the bottom statements are likely to be earlier developmentally than the top statements. Although, as Dingley's Promise and the assessment guidance points out, children are likely to have quite a spiky profile and are not necessarily going to fit neatly into that. But an example is at the bottom level of communication interaction, one of the I can statements is, I can imitate the communication of others, whereas one of the top I can statements is, I can commentate on what I see around me, verbally or using gestures or signs. So you can see that they are accumulating developmentally as you go up the assessment tool. The following points come straight from the DfE website. So the tools may be used in the following ways. An area of need is recognised through observation and, very importantly, discussed with parents and or carers. Then the appropriate area of need is selected from the assessment tools, or it might be all 4 areas of need, or it might be 2 or 3. You use the tool to find out what the child can do in their area of need. I think it's quite good practice to actually, as a starting point, fill out all 4, just so that you can see yourself that the area or areas of need that you thought were developmentally age appropriate actually are. They're really very simple and quick to do. So as a start point, I think that's quite good practice. Although the suggestion is that you could just pick the areas that you're concerned about. So your initial assessment is listed as your start point. So you put the date completed, who it's completed by, and the development that you have seen, and you put it as a score. So the scores are self-evident on the sheets, where emerging is a score of 1, supported is a score of 2, and independent is a score of 3. We have actually suggested that you use the last box to just work out your percentage score for the children. We've done that. It's different to what's on the website, in fact, but we've done that because we're using the percentage score in lots of the other things that I'm going to talk about shortly. Having made your starting point assessment, the suggestion on the DfE website is that you use a 1-page pupil profile to discuss and to note the child's strengths and the strategies best used to support them. This is the 1-page pupil profile on the DfE website as part of the assessment guidance. Again, it's there as a PDF, so you can print it and write on it. We're in the process of creating some Word versions of these, but for right now we have at least created one with some text boxes so that you can type in those if you so wish. And you can see that it's a really user-friendly document for any practitioner in your setting to pick up and know what best helps specific children. And it's a really nice document too to talk parents through what you've found in your assessments. In the Edit Support Strategies for Inclusion toolkit, there is a one-page pupil profile that's quite similar, and it was very much used for transition meetings last year and the year before. And you can continue to use that both for in your settings and for transition. But we feel that given that the DfE have put this non-statutory guidance onto their website, we would also very much welcome you using the DfE one-page pupil profile, both for recording in your setting the strengths and strategies for a child, but also for handing that over to FS2 when the child has their transition through to school. Again, this is straight off the DfE website as to how to use the assessment tools to create SMART targets. You use the assessment tool to outline the initial targets for a child. Using specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time-bound or SMART targets, you can help a child to make progress towards the assessment statements within the tool. This is the My Smart Goals sheet that's included on the DfE website. Many of you go to a West Berkshire graduated approach plan when you're first assessing a child's needs in the early stages before you've really put in any specific interventions for them at SEND support level. Often you will use a West Berkshire graduated approach plan. But having discussed this with our early years advisory team, we feel that the My Smart Goals sheet actually very much does the job of a graduated approach plan. And we are very happy for you to use either one as your first point of assessment. But given that the DfE have produced, Dingley's Promise have produced for the DfE the My Smart Goals sheet, we're very much encouraging you to use that to record your first steps with a child of support, partly because actually you can use it as the first part of your SAPP. So it might be that you go on to put a child onto a SAPP and it can feed into that. So a little bit more of that later. We have created a Word version of the My Smart Goals sheet and just added somewhere to put the child's name. And then you can see that I filled out an example here. So next to the goal, I've just added which broad area of need that I'm taking my I can statement from. And then in the goal box, I've filled it out where I've actually put the I can statement that we're working towards. I've copied it out of the assessment tool where I've assessed the child's needs. And I'm taking an I can statement from near the bottom of the tool, and I've taken one where the child is not scoring or is perhaps only emerging. And the statement that I've taken is one that I feel that the child really needs to make progress in order to be well included and happily making progress. So in cognition and learning, the one that I've chosen here is I repeat actions demonstrating cause and effect. And the SMART goal that I have included underneath is by April 2026, I will repeat an action with a cause and effect toy or activity on 2 out of 5 occasions. The next box is how you can support me. So I filled that out here to say, offer me cause and effect toys and activities regularly, including people games where my familiar adult is the activity to be activated. See edit information on intensive interaction, curiosity programme, enticing toys, people games, ready, steady, go, and bubbles. The next goal I've identified, I've just put into the section next to the word goal that it's from communication and interaction. And I've put both the I CAN statement we're working towards and the SMART goal. So the I CAN statement we're working towards, I've chosen I can imitate the communication of others. And the SMART goal is, by April 2026, I will imitate the sound or gesture made by my familiar adult on 2 out of 5 occasions. How you can support me, in that box I've put as an example, act as my play partner, notice what I'm interested in and make a playful invitation using a sound or a gesture. See edit information on intensive interaction and curiosity programme. Repeat the sound or gesture to help me tune in to what you're doing, giving me plenty of time to respond. So you can see these goals are very small steps. You'll see that it's right now February 2026. I'm intending to review these particular goals. I've got a further one as well in social and emotional. I've decided that sensory and physical for this hypothetical child is developmentally appropriate, so I've not done a goal there. And these goals are set out in February 2026. I'm aiming to review them by April, which is actually not too far away, because I'm hoping that by offering the child opportunities in these areas many times during the sessions that they attend, I'm going to see them make progress in that short amount of time, and I may be able to move on to my next I CAN statement and create a SMART goal from that in the different areas. We're encouraging you to use the assessment tool as soon as you notice any needs for children in your settings, and to use the My Smart Goals sheet or a graduated approach plan to plan and then to do the activities and the strategies that are going to help children make progress. You're then going to review how that's going. So as we just mentioned on the last slide, the review section of the My Smart Goals sheet, those particular SMART goals can be reviewed really quickly and should be reviewed really quickly within sort of a month, 5 or 6 weeks. But each term, it's good practice to do the whole assessment tool again in the areas of need that you've identified, so that you can see what progress overall the children are making. This is straight from the DfE website. There may come a time when you feel external specialist support is required. You should only request specialist support when you are satisfied that you have used a graduated approach to understand the child and their needs. And even when they are waiting to be seen, you should continue to trial different approaches to support the child. Something that you should be doing if you're feeling that a child is needing more specialist level of support, that their needs are higher, is to increase the My Smart Goals sheet to a SAPP. So on the DfE website, you have the first 2 pages of the SAPP separate to the My Smart Goals sheet. And we're recognising that the My Smart Goals sheet can be done as a kind of first way of recording your interventions with a child to see them make progress. But where you're recognising that the child has got higher needs, go to the first 2 pages and increase the My Smart Goals sheet to SAPP level. So that means a more of a sit-down meeting with parents or carers to complete the first 2 pages. The first 2 pages of the SAPP are again in PDF form on the DfE website, and we're yet to produce a Word version of them, although we do have a version with text boxes if you want to type. Alternatively, they're very similar to the support and achievement play plans that you've been using all along in West Berkshire. So you could use the first page of that support and achievement play plan that you're used to using. But the idea is that these 2 pages from the DfE website and the last page, the My Smart Goals page, form the entire support and achievement play plan. Having put the child onto a SAPP and talked to parents or carers about the possibility of making further referrals, you can then do that through the referral methods to the different services. On the CYPF website, there are the details of how to make referrals through to services such as speech and language therapy or the neurodiversity service. But for EDIT, we are suggesting that you could consider making a SENCO referral for EDIT support if there are no other health referrals to us being made. So for that, you're filling out a brief SENCO referral form and you're including the child's DfE Assessment Tools scores. So this is where you need the percentage scores as well as the scores out of 72. I've created this table from the information that Dingley's Promise gave in their training about the DfE assessment tool that they did through the Stronger Practice Hub recently. And helpfully, it's just giving us an indication of what percentage score a child might have at different ages. So in communication and interaction at 2 to 3 years, we'd be looking at 65% as a developmentally typical score. At 3 to 4 years old, we're looking at 85%, and at 4 to 5 years old, we're looking at 95%. In sensory and physical, for a 2 to 3 year old, we're looking at 75%. For a 3 to 4 year old, we're looking at 85%. And for a 4 to 5 year old, we're looking at 95%. For social and emotional, we're looking at 60% for a 2 to 3 year old, 85% for a 3 to 4 year old, and 95% for a 4 to 5 year old. And for cognition and learning, we're looking at 65% for a 2 to 3 year old, 85% for a 3 to 4 year old, and 95% for a 4 to 5 year old. These figures are not an exact science by any means, and we would always talk to you as practitioners about what you're experiencing in your settings and what barriers to learning you're perceiving for a child. But our experience so far of using the assessment tools and also the training, I've attended 2 sets of training now from Dingley's Promise, where high need is being suggested at about 40% below anticipated development. Whereas SEN support, which would be your ordinarily available provision, is coming out at 30 to 15% below anticipated development. And a child who's just within normal limits, coming out at universal and needing your usual quality first teaching, is less than 15% below anticipated development. Thinking about our Westmarks SEN inclusion funding, we're suggesting that if a child is coming out at SEN support, or perhaps a group of children are coming out at SEN support level on their DfE assessments, that you would apply for targeted SEN inclusion funding. And this is the new version of the form using the DfE assessment tool. So this is for an individual child, or for a number of individual children, rather. So for the first child, the I can statement that hypothetically we're wanting to work on is I can communicate choice between two options. And this hypothetical child is coming out as a supported level, so a score of 2 at the start point. And then we've also got a review in this particular form, just to give you an example. So the review is showing that by having a choice board twice a day for a term, this child has hypothetically moved from supported to independent in that I can statement. So that child can now independently communicate choice between two options. The next child down is working on cognition and learning. And the I can statement is I can transition to a new task with visuals. The intervention that they're going to have is a now next intervention strategy daily for 1 term. Their start point is listed as emerging, so 1 point, and hypothetically they've moved by the end of the term to a supported level. And the next child down, they're working within sensory and physical. Their I can statement is I can respond to games with physical touch. The intervention that is going to take place are people games, rhymes with actions, daily for 5 minutes for 4 weeks. And they're listed as being emerging at the beginning and supported by the end of the term. And the last child down in the example is working in social and emotional. Their statement is I can wait my turn with a familiar adult. The interventions are going to be 1-to-1 simple turn-taking games with a key person 3 times a week for 6 weeks. And they're assessed at supported in their start point, and at their review they're still supported, so they might need to continue that strategy for longer, or we might need to look at shifting to a different one. This next table, which is also within the targeted SENIF application, is to be used if you have a group of children who will usefully be able to work on the same I can statement. So you're putting in a targeted SENIF application for a group of children who have a similar profile of needs. In this example, their group target is I can wait my turn with a familiar adult. And the intervention type and frequency is a simple turn-taking game in a small group with the key person 3 times a week for 6 weeks. And again, this is filled in both at the start point and at the review stage to give you an example of that. So each child is just listed according to their initials, and then their DfE score is highlighted at start point. So the first child was emerging at the beginning and is supported after the 6 weeks intervention. So that's how to use the 2 tables within our targeted SENIF application. For children who are scoring around that 40% below expected mark on their DfE assessments, we're suggesting that they might be our specialist SENIF applications. And this is one of the tables from the specialist SENIF request form. So you'll notice that you've got a table like this for each of the broad areas of need. This is the cognition and learning one. And it looks like an awful lot to fill out, but actually you're only filling in one of the rows of this table for each of the broad areas of need that you are assessing children in. So assuming that we're all perhaps at start point at this time, you would be filling out the date that you've completed the assessment, who's completed it, what the score was out of 72, and what percentage the child has scored. And that will really help us to assess at panel what level of specialist SENIF funding to provide. Dingley's Promise have very much expressed their hope that the DfE assessment tool that they've developed will really help with EHC requests, or in West Berkshire we also have early years SEN funding requests for when children go on to school or if they're at a maintained nursery. This is an example of one of the areas of need in the EHC assessment request, learning and development, and it ties in very much with the cognition and learning assessment tool. So this is one way in which you could fill out the learning and development area in the EHC assessment request. You'll see that in the example, the hypothetical child has got strengths listed and difficulties listed, and in both instances, the statements in the assessment tool have been used. So for this hypothetical child, we've had a look at where this little one is scoring at emerging or supported. Generally speaking, I won't have very much in the way of independent scoring for a child who's going for an EHC, particularly in their area of greatest need. But where they're emerging or supported, I can list those ICANN statements as strengths. So in this instance, I have that they are able to focus on an activity of their own choosing for up to 2 minutes, that they can group or organise objects in a way that are meaningful to them, that they can recognise familiar objects and the joy they bring, and that they can use their different senses to explore new objects and environments. Those are all strengths for this hypothetical child. Whereas where I had statements where the child is yet to score and maybe they're low down the assessment tools, so they're one of the earlier developmental areas, then I can list those in the difficulties column because they're yet to be showing any achievement in those particular areas. So my examples are that my little one is unable to cooperate with a familiar person when playing, for example, rolling a ball back and forth, that he is unable to link ideas during play, such as putting a teddy in a car and pushing it along. He's unable to play with items in different ways. Instead, he follows certain schemas in his play. And he is unable to repeat actions demonstrating cause and effect. And then for the outcome, the longer term outcome, for this child, I've used some of the top statements, the ones that you'll remember I had in a darker green at the top of the assessment tool. I've just suggested some of those for his longer term outcomes. So he will be able to cooperate with a familiar person when playing, for example, rolling a ball back and forth, and he will be able to use a visual routine to support his understanding of the day. Now, you know your children really well in your settings, and you may very well want to add your own comments and statements into the strengths and difficulties and outcomes. But this is a way that you can use the DfE assessment tool really effectively to show a child's strengths and difficulties and potential outcomes. And of course, in the EHC assessment request, we have a section where you're asked for standardised scores, and you can put the DfE assessment scores into that and include the DfE assessment tool sheets in with the evidence that you're supplying. I know from the trainings that I've attended that Dingley's Promise's intention in developing the DfE assessment tool was to kind of set up a bit of a one-stop shop so that practitioners aren't filling out lots and lots of different things for children, but are really basing their assessment and their assess, plan, do, review cycles around the assessment guidance on the DfE website. So the way that they've suggested this being done and the way that I've suggested this being done in this training is to use pupil profile for initial conversations with parents and carers, to use the assessment tool as your starting point for assessment, to use the My Smart Goals for planning what to do and to review progress, to use the SAP pages 1 and 2 if the needs continue to be high and need to be discussed more formally, to consider referral to EDIT and other services if the needs continue to be high, and to consider SENIF application if you're a private, voluntary or independent setting, or early years SEN funding request for early years maintained settings, using the assessment tool to provide evidence of need. And then if you're making an early years SEN request or an EHC request, you can bring in the ICANN statements to pinpoint the child's strengths, difficulties and next steps. I hope that this has been really helpful to you, and I look forward to supporting you in using the DfE assessment tool as we go forward with children.